let's have a little talk about characterization and villain presence. What is characterization? Well, it's defined as the creation of a fictional character. In anime, this is usually used so that the characters can have traits that are unique to them and that particular anime. For example, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Joey's confidence level, which was very low at the start of Duel Monsters, particularly Season 1, gradually improves until it reaches its climax at the conclusion of Duelist Kingdom. Secondly, villain presence. What exactly is that? Well, there really isn't a definition per se, but it's usually when the villain can be seen as a constant and looming threat during their tenure. So now that we've identified what those two things are, we're going to go through each arc that I've covered up until this point, and show just what makes each villain tick until we get to the most recent villain, Siegfried von Schroeder. I'll also be including episode numbers with each villain, since every video was always the first for someone. If you're here for the first time, I will be referencing a lot of things that are covered at earlier points in this series. You've been warned. Number 1. Maximilian Pegasus. Pegasus appears between episodes 1 and 49, which span the Duelist Kingdom arc. Now, in order for this to make sense, we first have to look at Pegasus' backstory in order to figure out his motivations, which seem to differ between the manga and anime, both of which I'll be going over, albeit using the dub names because it's just easier on my tongue. Purists, you can hate on me in the comments if you want. From the brief flashbacks we get, we can assume that Pegasus was born into money. This explains both his taste for fine things and his incredible eccentricity. When he was a child, he met Cecilia, the love of his life. Tragically, however, she died suddenly of an illness when he's 17, although the anime depicts her dying literally at the altar and when they were newlyweds. From then on, Pegasus devotes his life entirely to finding a way to resurrect her. His travels take him around the world, and eventually to Egypt, where he meets Shadi and acquires the Millennium Eye. He soon determines that he might be able to resurrect Cecilia, provided he combines the power of the Eye with Kaiba Corp's holographic technology. Or something. See, this is where the differences between the anime and manga come up. As the president of Industrial Illusions, one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, Pegasus has a lot to gain by acquiring Kaiba Corporation, and so he accepts the Big Five's offer to overthrow the then comatose Seto Kaiba. In the manga, part of their deal includes him defeating Yugi in order to boost their winning publicity, apparently. While in the anime, Pegasus simply needs the power of Yugi's puzzle in order to resurrect his wife. After he loses to Yugi, Bakura takes his Millennium Eye, which apparently kills him in the manga. Although in real life, the likelihood of actually dying from having one eye gouged out is fairly slim to none. In the anime, he lives, but remains mostly in seclusion, appearing every once in a while in order to provide Yugi and Kaiba with world-saving cards. Now, what do his motives and backstory have to do with his villain presence? Well, his backstory, for both him and the other characters listed here, fell directly into his motivation for being a villain. Keep in mind, his wife died when he was very young, and when they were newlyweds no less. This makes him not only sympathetic, but it also adds a new layer to his character. He's also the leader of Industrial Illusions, making him a businessman, but not a bland one. He's also one who just enjoys having fun, hence the reason why he created the card game and enjoys playing it. In fact, his motives are to such an extent that he even states within the dub that in spite of what he's lost, he fights on with all his might. So Pegasus. Great character, with an awesome screen presence that permeates throughout the entire Duelist Kingdom arc, and well afterward. Well done, sir. Well done. Number 2. Noah Kaiba. Noah appears in the Virtual World arc, a filler arc which spans episodes 98 to 121, which actually splits off from the Battle City arc, kind of splitting it into 2 or 3 parts depending on how you look at it. Okay, so just like we did with Pegasus, we're going to be covering Noah's backstory first, so here we go. Noah lived with his power-hungry and wealthy father Gozaburo Kaiba in luxury. To groom him as the eventual heir of Kaiba Corp, he was made to study heavily in various fields of academia, music, and sports, not unlike the eventually adopted Seto. However, he enjoyed his lessons. To ensure he had the top education, Gozaburo hired only the best instructors and tutors. When Noah was around 12 years old, however, he was involved in a major car accident that rendered his body completely useless. In the hopes of saving his son, Gozaburo uploaded Noah's mind onto a supercomputer just before Seto was adopted. Noah's consciousness lived in a virtual world that initially only included his own empty bedroom. but was ultimately expanded to include many other areas, to the point where Noah eventually has his own virtual pet. At first, Noah found his virtual existence almost pleasant, even enjoyable. The limits and bugs in the virtual citizens and his own virtual pet caused Noah to grow increasingly frustrated, agitated, and in some cases even sadistic to seek out some satisfaction in his virtual existence. While his intelligence and ego grew exponentially, with no real human contact, his maturity remained at the same level as a small child. Gozaburo had adopted Seto as a model for Noah, but eventually he forgot about his own son, realizing that he would always be a spoiled brat in favor of teaching Seto. When Seto took over Kaiba Corp, Gozaburo, in both frustration and defeat, uploaded his own mind into Noah's virtual world. So, now that we have his backstory, let's take a look at Noah's motives. About 6 years after he arrived in the virtual world, Noah wanted to take revenge on Seto for being better than he was in their childhoods. The alternate reason is so that he can escape the virtual world by taking over one of their bodies, which he tries during the arc against Yugi, only to be repelled. While at first it can be confusing since he has multiple motives, it's eventually revealed that Noah and Gozaburo were actually working together, until Gozaburo reveals that he really doesn't care about Noah, who eventually takes Gozaburo out kamikaze style. So Noah is a little more slippery in terms of an actual motivation behind his actions. However, the fact that Gozaburo is behind it all just makes you want to give up on Noah, since it turns out that he isn't actually the villain per se. Even if Gozaburo was the main baddie, we don't know him at all, aside from the fact that he's power hungry and cares about no one and nothing but his own company. Number 3. Merrick/Youngmi Merrick. Now this is actually really interesting. Here we have a character with multiple personalities. As such, I'm going to be covering them both separately, beginning with regular Merrick. Merrick's regular self appeared between episodes 50 and 89, came back between episodes 142 and 144, as well as appearing during the ceremonial battle, which spans between episodes 220 and 224. Backstory. Merrick's family guarded the tomb of the pharaoh for generations, and 2 Millennium items, the Millennium Rod and the Millennium Necklace, were passed on to Merrick and his sister Ishizu. Merrick was forbidden to leave the pharaoh's tomb due to his father's fear that the freedom and marvels of the outside world would further divert Merrick's attention from his heritage. He no longer wanted to become a tomb keeper, so his adoptive brother Odeon asked if he could take Merrick's place. However, Merrick's father rejected the thought of Odeon doing so, and when Merrick was forced to take the initiation ritual to become a full tomb keeper, he spawned his second personality, Yami Merrick, from the pain that he endured. Sometime later, he and Ishizu took a forbidden trip to the surface, but their father found out and attempted to punish Odeon for not stopping them, by killing him. In the midst of his father's torturing of Odeon, Merrick blanked out, and Yami Merrick emerged for the first time to resist his father's punishment and claim the Millennium Rod for himself. Ignoring his father's orders to put it down, Yami Merrick used its powers to smash his father against the wall. And when Ishizu protested against this, she suffered the same exact strike. Yami Merrick then proceeded to kill his own father. After Yami Merrick was sealed away within Merrick's body by Odeon, Merrick believed that the pharaoh had ordered the loyalist Shadi to kill his father, due to Odeon having said that it was Shadi who killed him. Trying to be a big brother and hiding from Merrick that it was actually his alter ego who had done so. This increased Merrick's grudge and resentment to the pharaoh, causing him to create the Rare Hunter organization. As a teen, Merrick was the leader of the Rare Hunters, as he wished with the Millennium Rod to obtain the 3 Egyptian god cards so that he could unlock their powers for himself, gain the title of Pharaoh, and set his family free from the duty of the Tomb Keepers. In the dub, he simply wants the god cards in the Millennium Puzzle so that he can unlock the Pharaoh's power for himself and use them to rule the world. He also had a hidden agenda, to get revenge on the nameless Pharaoh's soul for killing his father, as he mistakenly believed that it was the Pharaoh's fault. Although he and his Rare Hunters uncovered the Winged Dragon of Ra and Slifer the Sky Dragon from where Maximilian Pegasus had hidden them away in Egypt, they were unable to uncover the Obelisk the Tormentor, which had been taken by Ishizu and which was eventually given to Seto Kaiba and then later on to Yugimoto at the conclusion of Battle City. So with all that in mind, what is Merrick's motivation? Well, if we look at this again, his motives actually differ between the sub and dub. Within the sub, Merrick wants to claim the title of Pharaoh for himself in order to free his family and to end its legacy. Seems pretty straightforward. In the dub, he wants to get the god cards and the Millennium Puzzle so that he can rule as Pharaoh. A little less clear. Merrick is a tragic antagonist. He had a rough family life growing up, and he wants to get revenge on the one whom he believes caused him such grief, the nameless pharaoh. In the end, however, Merrick comes to grips with what he's done and eventually becomes an ally to Yugioh and his friends, growing and evolving as a character. As such, he isn't the real villain here. That dubious honor goes to his alter ego, Yami Merrick. Number 4. Yami Merrick. Yami Merrick appears between episodes 90 and 141. He is the most psychotic Yu-Gi-Oh villain on this list. For reasons I'll get into, he's really creepy as well as diabolical. First though, his backstory. Yami Merrick was born from the pain and suffering that Merrick had endured when he was forced to take the initiation ritual in order to become a full tomb keeper at 10 years old by his father. A year later, after Merrick's forbidden trip to the surface, Merrick returned from his trip, having realized that his departure had been discovered, and was horrified to see his father torturing Odeon to a presumed death. In the dub, Odeon was going to be exiled, but was still almost unconscious lying on the floor. Odeon's state enraged Merrick, allowing Yami Merrick to assume control for the first time. Though he thanked his father for dealing with Odeon, Yami Merrick proceeded to resist his father's punishment upon himself and claim the Millennium Rod for himself. Ignoring his father's orders to put the item down, Yami Merrick used its power to smash him against the wall. And when his sister Ishizu protested for him to stop, he blasted her back and froze her in place with the Millennium Rod. Yami Merrick then proceeded to murder his father in cold blood. In the dub, he simply sent his father to the Shadow Realm, although that's quite possibly a punishment worse than death. He prepared to kill Odeon next, but Odeon was able to rouse him, his presence calming Merrick down and sealing Yami Merrick away within Merrick's own body. It's never stated, though, whether or not Yami Merrick subconsciously removed Merrick's guilt as he did in the manga. Motivations. While Merrick's goal of becoming the new pharaoh was fueled by a personal affliction towards the pharaoh particularly, Yami Merrick didn't seem to have any goal except for spreading pain and suffering, and also existing outside, both to no longer be sealed within his alter ego and because he considers himself to be the true Merrick. In the dub, however, he shares Merrick's goals in addition to his sadistic desire to spread pain. Before his death, he tried to reason with Merrick, saying that they could rule the world together. However, given his personality, he was simply trying to persuade Merrick to free him from his current predicament. To conclude, Yami Merrick is by no means my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh villain. He is far too psychotic, nor does he have much of a defined character, aside from the shared traits he has with Merrick. However, he is still a solid villain with clear motives and even clearer origins. Number 5. Darts. Darts appears throughout the Rake and the Dragons arc, which spans episodes 145 to 184. First, his backstory. 10,000 years ago, Atlantis, an island that was isolated from the rest of the world, was a perfect civilization. One day, however, meteors rained down upon the kingdom. These meteorites were mysterious and powerful stones of the orichalcos, and they glowed a bright greenish blue. Those stones imbues the people of Atlantis with ultimate knowledge and power. And in just a few years, Atlantis went on to become the most advanced civilization on the planet, and was even more advanced than the modern world. However, with power eventually came corruption and greed, eventually leading Atlantis to its downfall. Ironheart, the king of Atlantis, gave his throne to his son Darts at the age of 21. Soon, the stones of the orichalcos began to expose the evil in people, and turned those with darkness on the inside into wicked monsters on the outside. Darts actually witnessed his own wife, Iana, become a horrid, ugly beast. In the Japanese version, she actually attacks him, and he's forced to kill her with his sword. Confused and frightened, Darts consulted a stone of the orichalcos for guidance. The orichalcos granted upon Darts great power and lent him the orichalcos soldiers to do his bidding. It told him to resurrect an ancient mystical being known as the Great Leviathan, which would help him to destroy the world and create a new one that would be free of all evil. Darts then became corrupted and misguided. Ironheart and Chris, who was actually Darts' daughter, fled and called upon the world of duel monsters and its guardians, the 3 legendary dragons. In actuality, these were 3 soldiers whom Darts had transformed into dragons, for help against the corrupted Darts. One day, an army of benevolent magical creatures, including the 3 dragons led by Ironheart, met with Darts' army of the orichalcos soldiers and the Great Leviathan, and as such, the Battle of Atlantis took place. The battle concluded with no side being victorious. The 3 dragons were eventually frozen in ice, the magical creatures were sent back to their own world, and the soldiers of the orichalcos were ultimately destroyed. The Great Leviathan was also sealed away from the world, and Atlantis sank beneath the sea. For 10,000 years, Darts collected the souls of boys and men in order to ensure the return of the Great Leviathan into the world. With time, the number of souls of boys and men that Darts had stolen stretched into the millions, thanks in part to his underlings. Motivations. The corruption of the Orichalcos made Darts believe that the world was a wicked place, and that humans had an inherent malice within their hearts. The transformation that the Orichalcos had inflicted on his fellow Atlanteans was, he believed, a punishment for being evil, as the outside of man had become as twisted as their insides. Although this is a tricky statement, Darts' motives can be defined in two sentences. Number one, he was driven to revive the Great Leviathan to raise the world so that he could reconstruct it in the image of the glorious Atlantis. To do so, Darts required the souls of boys and men. He wandered the earth for 10,000 years, presumably kept alive by the power of the Orichalcos. He knew that he'd found one of the powerful souls that he required when he encountered the pharaoh Atem, spoilers, in ancient Egypt, and witnessed his control of the powers of darkness and his ability to command duel monsters and the 3 Egyptian god cards. He also witnessed the pharaoh, alongside Cypher the Sky Dragon, pursue Thief King Bakura and Diabound. However, Darts could not capture the pharaoh's soul at that time because Bakura and Zork necromancies were in his way. However, Darts seems to not have any fear of Zork, and when he showed the past of the pharaoh during their duel, his first battle with Bakura in fact, Darts never saw Zork as a threat to either himself or the Great Leviathan, due to the fact that the powers of the Leviathan were far greater than those of Zork's. He therefore had to wait another 5,000 years, 3,000 in the Japanese version, to capture the pharaoh's soul. It was unclear precisely when Darts began to collect the souls of boys and men, but eventually he established a multinational conglomerate that was named Perideus, which became a well-known yet mysterious force within the business world, eventually rivaling Kaiba Corp and buying out all of its shares, which in turn pisses off Kaiba. But that was not the only organization that Darts had formed. Darts also controlled the Doma organization, Perideus in the English version. A group formed to gather souls of boys and men to feed the Leviathan by challenging unsuspecting male players to games of duel monsters, only to have their souls taken by the Seal of Orichalcos, a card that Darts had infused with the Orichalcos power. So, Darts. He's a sympathetic antagonist, but not because of his motives, far from it. He's sympathetic because he's under the control of the Orichalcos. And as Yamayugi states within the dub, it's been filling his mind with lies for more than 10,000 years. So Darts, in conclusion, is a very good villain. Not quite on the level of Pegasus or Merrick, but he's close. Now, why did I go through this exhaustive list with you guys? Was it just to waste your time? Can't I just get onto the arc already? Well, I brought all that up in order to bring the 3 things that all play into creating a good character back to the forefront. Villain presence, believable motives, and a sympathetic backstory. I bring all these up, simply put, to tell you this. The villain of the Grand Championship, Siegfried von Schroeder, has none of these! At least not in the anime. He has no backstory, he has no motivation. I don't feel anything for this guy aside from how I hate him for pushing around his brother Leon to achieve his own goals. Oh, but it gets better, my friends, because Siegfried actually does have some meat to him. But only on the official wiki page for his character. On the website, it says the following. Enjoy. Siegfried was born as a new successor of Schroeder Corp. His childhood and early years were affected by educational abuse, very similar to Seto Kaiba's own past. Because of this educational wounding in his youth, Siegfried created an inner compulsion to be successful. He and Kaiba first met at a business party at the age of 8. Siegfried's father introduced his son as a child prodigy, who had an unbelievable talent for computer programming. Man, I wish I could get into that field. Siegfried managed to bypass Kaiba Corp's security system and played with the power supply to demonstrate his genius, impressing Kaiba at that time. When Gozaburo Kaiba announced the new company deal belonging to Kaiba Corporation, both Siegfried and his father were left stunned and crushed. This event triggered Siegfried, who promised himself to defeat Kaiba Corporation someday. His father was eventually driven mad after so many defeats against Kaiba Corp, and so Siegfried eventually became the new CEO of Schroeder Corp. He first gets rid of military department and enters the game industry. But in a meeting, one of the Corp's executives says that Seto Kaiba has also become the new CEO of Kaiba Corp, and that they had entered the game industry as well. Siegfried thinks that this is a lie, but then he realizes it's true, and he works even harder to surpass Kaiba. Finally, he invents holographic virtual duel system for Duel Monsters games. He goes to Industrial Illusions to make a deal with Maximilian Pegasus. However, he was late. Seto Kaiba made the deal instead, which made Siegfried even angrier at Kaiba. Siegfried sought to take down Kaiba Corp as revenge because he felt that Seto Kaiba stole his plans for holographic dueling technology. In the sub version, it's because Kaiba's project was accepted before he arrived to display his own technology to Industrial Illusions. That's an okay backstory, I guess. The problem is that this review series targets the anime, not outside sources. Here's the thing about the other villains. Even in the dub, where their backstories are toned down, at least they're backstories that are stated and that are seen within the anime itself. Here, it's just hinted at, expecting you to have to look elsewhere to get the details out. Listen, internal materials should enrich the lore and the characters within it, be that a game, a show, or a magazine. In this case, it's a show. If I have to leave your show in order to figure out what's going on with your characters and what's going on inside their heads, that aspect of your show has failed. And you've failed. Again, it may make more sense in the sub version, but this is a comparison of the dub version of Siegfried, since that's the one that I'm the most familiar with. And here, he's a very weak villain. I mean, seriously, we went from Pegasus, to Noah, to Merrick and then later Yami Merrick, to Darts, who all had believable backstories and motivations, as well as a reason to be there, to friggin' Siegfried, who has none! Gah! Okay. Let's get back to this arc already. I think I've made my point. Where were we? Oh yeah, Seto comes out and announces the tournament, leading to a ton of duels that really don't matter in the end. What else is new?